what's going on internationally. How do we get to the place where, Putin decides he's going to just invade Russia? Nothing like this has happened since World War II.
Gonzalo Lira, dont nous diffusons ici une traduction d'un extrait de ses récents tours de table, est cet Américain d'origine chilienne, critique des conséquences de la politique occidentale en Ukraine, où il résidait en 2022, et qui fit brièvement la une des chroniques ukrainiennes lorsqu'il fut enlevé et emprisonné par les services secrets ukrainiens. Du PC chilien à Maria Zakharova, porte-parole du ministère des Affaires étrangères de Russie, en passant par tous ses ex-collègues et amis de l'ex-communauté du renseignement, tels Scott Ritter, beaucoup furent inquiets pour son sort, puis soulagés par sa libération, à la suite de la forte mobilisation que sa disparition avait provoquée, au Chili et aux États-Unis même. Pour ce tour de table, Gonzalo Lira avait invité deux retraités aguerris de la CIA, Larry Johnson et John Kiriakou. Comme pas mal de leurs confrères ou ex-collègues, ils apportent un témoignage aussi bien informé qu'instructif, permettant de bien comprendre comment et pourquoi l'incompétence calamiteuse et la désinformation fondée sur le déni des réalités se sont imposées à notre idéologie dominante, pour contribuer au désastre intellectuel et humain actuel. Comment et pourquoi, désormais vassalisé à l'appareil militaro-industriel états-unien, notre propre appareil idéologique, complaisamment qualifié d'exception culturelle française, n'est qu'un plagiat maladroit, à la remorque de son homologue américain. Comment désormais et pourquoi et pour servir quels intérêts, notre appareil idéologique, politique et médiatique de classe moyenne en est arrivé à relayer, sans broncher, la propagande impérialiste la plus ridicule et décalée.
Yeah, because to talk about the specific situation in Ukraine, what Larry was saying that, no analyst is going to tell the truth. And so how is the public at large and decision makers in particular going to make the right decisions? Because what's obvious to everybody who's in the alt commentariat community, if you will, the YouTube, this little circle of people who are watching this like it's a Mexican soap opera, right? We are getting the correct information because we are predicting things that are going to happen correctly. Whereas in the West, they are just out to lunch. I mean, I remember before when the conflict first started, I was talking to a friend of mine in the financial community. And he's a pretty sharp customer and very well informed. And he said, these sanctions aren't going to do anything to Russia. They will probably hurt the West. Mm-hmm. And of course, the decision makers went full throttle on the sanctions. And exactly what the guy said. The guy works at an investment bank, and his job was to analyze this stuff. But his job was to present realistic analysis. Whereas the CIA, the publicly funded intelligence agencies, seem to be completely off base. Wouldn't it be better to just shut down the CIA and just follow the Duran and a few other channels?
Well, I think Larry and I have both advocated that.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I add something too? I did an analysis one time. I was a junior analyst, and I did an analysis on a popular uprising in Bahrain. And I said, I believed that the Bahraini royal family would muddle through. They would give the opposition just enough to calm them down without giving them any real freedom, and they would muddle through. That ended up being what happened. But I was taken to task over that analysis, and I was told that I needed to start thinking outside the box. I freaking hate that phrase, first of all. Yes. I need to think out of the box. And I said to my boss, I said, listen,
you got to make stuff up. That's what it means.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I said to my boss, there's a difference between doing thoughtful analysis and just making shit up. Yeah. And you want me to just make shit up.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. But that happens every single day.
Yeah. But anyway, John, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, you didn't. No, yeah. Go ahead.
You were cutting me off. I'm upset. No.
Man, it must be my Larry phobia, because everything is a phobia now. There's transphobia, there's this phobia, that phobia. It's Larry phobia.
Well, there are a couple of other changes that have taken place. Let's call it sort of institutionally or procedurally. So the phenomena that John and I are describing of political influence over the intelligence analysis process is not new. I was fortunate that I was taught in the new analyst course by an old analyst by the name of George Allen,
Wow.
George Allen was the division chief over the Vietnam War, and he was the one had an analyst by the name of Sam Adams, literally a descendant of Sam Adams. And the advantage that Sam Adams had as an analyst was he had lived in Vietnam, he knew the terrain, but he was also wealthy. He was a multimillionaire. So he had what is called fuck you money. So because they couldn't threaten, if they threatened him with loss of his job, no big deal. He was going to survive and be able to feed his family. And what George Allen described to us, my class, there were about 12 of us in there. He described what it was like. He was getting phone calls from Lyndon Baines Johnson, from Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense. He was getting from the National Security Advisor. And it was over and over this pressure. Why don't you be a team player? You know, why are you saying that the Viet Cong have all of this extra forces when we've killed them all? And, you know, that was sort of the basic issue. And he told us, he said, I regret that I didn't push back harder. He said, because at the time I had 2 kids. One was in high school, one was starting college. I didn't have any money to fall back on. So he was basically a hostage to his economic situation, unable to tell the truth about what was going on. But the other change that is taking place is back in that era, in the 60s and 70s, the CIA still had a very good human ability where our case officers go overseas and persuade foreigners to come to work for us and to spy for us and to give us information and betray their own countries. What has happened started in the late 90s, accelerated into the 2000s, over-reliance on liaison reporting, where our intelligence comes from a foreign intelligence service and it just gets passed to us and then we put it out, which is why what's going on with a lot of the so-called analysis right now with respect to Ukraine is coming from the Ukrainians. Whatever the Ukrainians tell us, these analysts are repeating, and they're not even going out to challenge it critically. So that's, you know,
that is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. You know, I worked for a CIA deputy director. It was my last headquarters job. I was his executive assistant. And he used to say all the time that the job of the CIA is actually quite simple. It's to recruit spies to steal secrets and then to analyze those secrets to allow our policymakers to make the best informed policy. And on paper, that's perfect. That's exactly what the CIA should be doing. But in reality, the CIA has never done that. Never. Yeah. They've done things like, you know, smuggle Nazi war criminals into the country, or to infiltrate U.S. media organizations, or to drug people, as we said at the start of the show, just to see how they react, or you know, rather than developing sources. And let me tell you, it's hard work. I spent 8 years in operations. It's hard to convince somebody to commit espionage for you, or to commit treason for you, just because you're a nice guy and they enjoy your company and you're going to pay them a lot of money in the end. But it's hard work. Well, it's not hard work to drive to the Ukrainian intelligence service every morning and say, what do you got for me today? And then you go back to the station and you type it into the CIA's computer system and say, here's a liaison report, which then the White House or the Pentagon or the CIA promptly leaks to the New York Times or the Washington Post to make it look like the Ukrainians are going to win this war.
Yeah. I mean, because they're not winning. It's catastrophic, quite frankly.
Right.
I want to ask you something to flip the coin, if you will. Do you think that similar problems are befalling the Russians or the Chinese, for that matter? Or do you think that they have organized their intelligence services in a more rational sense in order to get a better sense of reality?
I think the Chinese, because of the money that they have, you know, they don't spend their money like we do on ridiculously expensive defense projects. They have a lot of free cash flow. And so they've coupled the collection of human intelligence with electronic collection of intelligence. The Russians do it the old-fashioned way. They recruit human sources to give them information. It's something that we've gotten away from in a really bad way. Now, with that said, and I'll repeat myself, I'm on record as saying that I don't think we should have a CIA. Not that a CIA wouldn't be valuable if it could be trusted and successfully and efficiently overseen by the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. But it's proven over the course of 75 years that it can't be trusted to do that. And so, you know, we've got the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, for example, that does fantastic analysis. We have a division of, not a division, but a bureau of the Department of Defense called Defense Human Services that does exactly what CIA operations does. It develops human sources. We've got NSA that does electronic intelligence collection. We've got DARPA that does all the experimentation and the scientific and technological advancements. There's no reason to have this out of control body called the CIA. It's doing the American people a disservice.
Yeah, no, but I when I refer to the Russian intelligence services and the Chinese intelligence services, what I'm interested in knowing is, are they providing their leadership, their respective leaderships, with accurate information, with an accurate analysis of the ground situation? Because it seems to me that what's going on with the CIA and Western intelligence services generally is that they are providing the leadership class with a completely distorted view of reality. And so they keep constantly being caught flat-footed. They're like, how did this happen? We were winning. Like, for instance, in this situation here, there is inevitably going to be a moment of collapse of the Zelensky regime. It's on the horizon. And everybody in Washington is going to be like, what happened? You know? Like,
well, they did the same with that. I mean, the same thing happened with Afghanistan, for heaven's sake. Okay? Just 2 years ago. So what you're seeing is we've witnessed a complete role reversal. What the Soviet Union used to be, the United States is. What the United States used to be, Russia is becoming.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, in the Soviet era, the party politics and the need to sort of tell people up on top what they wanted to hear was very, very strong. And that when you have a very centralized system, it inevitably caters or panders to the person at the top. And by contrast, the more decentralized it is, the more likely you are to actually get some real information. And
so
I think
I'm sorry.
I think the Russians are far superior to the United States on that count. And I don't think there really is at this point no incentive to lie to Vladimir Putin or to Lavrov or to the rest of or to Gerasimov and the military leadership. Because they recognize the survival as a nation is at stake. We're talking existential.
Good point.
And with
good point.
That sort of tends to clear up one's vision.
Focuses it. You can't bullshit when there's the real chance that you're going to be overrun. So they have to be, and so you think that maybe the CIA, the problem of it is that it has always considered the United States so rich and powerful that it sort of like almost doesn't matter, because I mean, things will work themselves out, so it's okay if we cut corners. That kind of mentality.
Yeah. Well, we're terrible at self-reflection, because if we would simply be honest with ourselves, step back and look at the record of the last 60 years, from Vietnam to the futile wars in Central America, to 2 wars in Iraq, to a war in Afghanistan, this Pax Americana, instead of Pax Americana, it's been more like Pax Americana, okay? And it's been an infection upon the world.
I'm gonna steal that. That's a good line.
Yeah, feel free. That was our motto at CIA. Anything worth doing well is we're stealing from someone else, okay? That was the only place you'd ever work where plagiarism was encouraged and rewarded, so.
Oh, so true. So true. And they used to call it Merving.
Yeah,
Merving. Plagiarism. You just merge it, so it goes in different directions, and you just claim credit for it.
Yeah. So,
but because the thing that drives me up the wall is that, see, because it seems at this time that we have the following situation in the West, where we have these intelligence services that get this information, and they have a bunch of press people that are more or less, I don't think that they're on their payroll per se, but they provide exclusive information so these various journalists can show up to their editor's office and say, hey, here, I got something from this CIA guy, ooh, it's real intelligence stuff. And so the CIA is providing false information because of the reasons that we discussed previously, and providing that information to the press that regurgitates it and spreads it out and propagandizes the people into believing things that are simply not true. Alexander Mercouris in yesterday's show, and I always recommend Alexander and the Durand, they're fantastic. He mentioned the fact that the Wall Street Journal, I haven't read this article, I'm just going by his account, but he's always, on point and reliable. He says how the Wall Street Journal put out an article talking about Putin and basically characterizing him as, Hitler in the days as Berlin was falling, and issuing nonsensical orders and pacing around and being hysterical, which could not be further from the truth. I mean, because everybody's been noticing the various meetings that Putin has been running. They're very competent and very on point. And I mean, he seems to be like a man in charge in full, and everybody seems to be lockstep, not fearful of him, but rather, yeah, we agree, let's go where this guy is telling us to go or leading us towards. And so the Wall Street Journal, which is supposed to be a reputable news site, a newspaper, is spewing things that are objectively not true. And the smarter people who read the Wall Street Journal are saying to themselves, well, this must be true. And it's just bullshit. And I'm like, dude, what the hell is going on with you? So my point is, do you think that the way the system has become organized, I'm not saying that there's some cabal or something, I think it's just a natural evolution, but do you think that the way the system is currently organizing, whereby erroneous information, erroneous analysis coming from intelligence services is being passed to reporters and essentially being propagandized?
Well, but is it erroneous?
The option?
Maybe you're giving them too much credit. There was a thing in the press just a few weeks ago about Russiagate, where a Washington Post editor had emailed a reporter. The reporter had gotten some information from the CIA saying the Russians were involved in getting Trump elected. And he was saying, this just sounds wrong to me. No. And the editor wrote back and said, but if anybody would know, wouldn't they know? I can't believe they would get something like this wrong. Well, it's not an issue of getting it wrong. It's that they're lying to you.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic journalist who's now at Bloomberg. He used to be with, oh my gosh, we started off with the LA Times. But anyway, Jason Leopold. Jason Leopold has been described by a senior DOD official as a FOIA terrorist because he has made more Freedom of Information Act requests than any other person in the world, right?
Really?
He's the one who used FOIA, for example, to break the Hillary Clinton email story. So what he did, this is about, 2 or 3 years ago, he sent a FOIA request to the CIA asking for copies of all communications between the CIA's Office of Public Affairs and journalists, all journalists. And what he found, among other things, was a series of emails traded between CIA and Ken Dilanian, who is the lead national security correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC. And he found that Ken Dilanian was sending his articles to the CIA for clearance before he was sending them to his own editor. And another thing that he found was that the CIA's Office of Public Affairs was warning journalists not to publish anti-CIA information or they would not be invited to the Christmas party anymore. Totally seriously.
Oh my God! You know,
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not invited to the
so they
Christmas
backed
party.
off.
Oh, let me slit my wrists.
Oh my God, yeah. And we talk about Operation Mockingbird, for example, where until 1975, the CIA was recruiting journalists or placing CIA officers in journalistic outlets. They don't need to do that anymore. The journalists now do it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, most outlets don't have a budget for investigative journalism.
Right.
And secondly, the CIA is going to give you a scoop. You gist it. You put your name in the byline. You make it onto the front page. You get promoted. That's just what they do now. That's just a reality of today's media.
So just a series of bad motivations, of bad incentives, misincentives, is creating this situation where lies from the intelligence community are passed on to journalists who spew more lies, and it just expands the lies all over the place until the people have a completely distorted sense of reality. Is that basically?
I would say that the real flaw is, as long as covert action is allowed to remain part of the CIA, it will never be able to reform itself. I agree with John that it probably ought to just be burned to the ground. I would start it over. I think there is a need for, if you will, a professional cadre of analysts, but genuinely independent analysts. And the problem with a creature like the CIA is it's sort of like that dog you have at home that wants to go out for a walk. So the CIA eagerly waits for the treats that the White House will throw it, or for the pat on the head for, boy, that was great analysis. And up until the point that you're actually pointing out that, hey, you guys at the White House, you've shit the bed. Well, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to be told that they need to go buy some Depends and put those on. So you've always got this tension where, as long as covert action is operating, it's going to actually drive the attempts to recruit human sources if that's going on. And so you're going to always have corrupted intelligence produced by the Directorate of Operations. If you're going to have a covert action capability, it needs to be walled off, be its own agency. But then that's something that, frankly, is really dangerous, because when you look at our history, as John mentioned earlier, the history of covert action is not one with great success scattered about.
No,
it's
nothing to be
failure after failure, or where we make the world worse off, not better off.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I think to myself, of different kinds of analyses that I've come across, mostly financial, quite frankly. And that financial analysis is usually spot on. If some financial analyst is saying, "Oh, it's more or less like this," you can take it to the bank, because money is riding on these decisions. There are consequences immediately. If an analyst says, buy this bond or don't buy this bond, a lot of money can be lost or won depending on the correct analysis, right? But insofar as the CIA and these intelligence services are concerned, there's no consequences, it seems to me. I mean, I can say that Vladimir Putin tomorrow is going to be replaced by a purple kangaroo as the president of the Russian Federation. I say this as an analyst at the CIA, and it proves out to be wrong, of course, and nothing happens to me.
But that's the reality, and that's the reality in the CIA. For years, I worked for a guy who had been a Saudi analyst and then moved into management. And when he made it up to GS-14, he told a group of us that he was going to make a name for himself by saying over and over and over again to everybody who would listen that the Saudi royal family would be overthrown. And so this became his thing. It became a joke for us. But as administrations change and, new people coming into these positions just don't know any better, this is a really powerful briefing that they get when they first win the presidential election, that the Saudi royal family is going to be overthrown. Well, he made it up into the senior intelligence service, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. He ends up one of the deputy directors of the CIA, even though the Saudi royal family not only was never overthrown, but is probably in a stronger position now than it ever has been in its history.
Yeah.
The truth never mattered. What mattered was he came across as a smart guy who had lived in the region and spoke Arabic, and he really passionately believed this to be true. In fact, he didn't passionately believe it to be true. He believed that it would set him apart from everybody else, saying that there was no danger to the Saudi royal family, and he was the one that got promoted.
Yeah, in fact, if you screw up, you're most likely to get promoted. You get rewarded, not punished. I mean, I have one of my, so in the first year I was there, I was in the career trainee program. And this is one of the first run-ins where in the past, the career trainee program was only for future case officers, people who were going to go out and try to recruit spies. But I was in the era when they had both analysts and operations people and science and technology and admin people. So Valerie Plame, for example, was part of my class. So one of my classmates, his first assignment was in Costa Rica. And what he discovered was that the predecessor that had been there before him had supposedly recruited some agents that were giving information on the Sandinistas. It turned out the guy had fabricated them. Ugh. So my friend, he disclosed the fabrication, pointed it out. He got a $20,000 bonus doing it. The guy that had created the false agents, he later wound up as chief of station in Romania.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, but that's the point. That lack of accountability, because that's what we're really talking about here. If people are going to be held accountable for the decisions they make, if they get people killed, or if they cause major mayhem, or give the wrong coordinates and you bomb the Chinese embassy in Sudan, we can go down the list. And that was the one thing that I really saw lacking out there, and I don't know what John's experience was, but the utter lack of accountability.
That's something else that we're seeing across the board in Western society, a lack of accountability. You are completely incompetent, and what happens to you? You get kicked upstairs. Look at Kamala Harris. Look at Ursula von der Leyen. She was current EU Commissioner President. She was the Minister of Defense of Germany, and she was an utter disaster, and she got kicked upstairs. It's almost like, if you're competent, your career is cratered. But if you're an idiot, you get a better position with a better salary. How did this happen, in your view, that failure is rewarded, that incompetence gets you ahead? How did this happen? I mean, this is a genuine question, and I'm asking you insofar as your expertise in the CIA is concerned, but I'm interested in it as a general problem that I view in the West. John?
Well,
I mean, it's a tough problem.
It's a tough question. Yeah, it's a tough question. And I think that there are several answers. One, it's very much an old boys club, and now an old boys and girls club, where at the top, at that senior level, they're all friends, and they all take care of one another. Now, there are some notable exceptions, of course, where personalities conflict and they go after each other. But for the most part, they all look out for each other at that very senior level. Another thing that I sort of came into contact with when dealing with people at that level is that they're also afraid that if somebody in a senior position becomes disgruntled, that they'll go to the media. And that would be disastrously embarrassing. I worked for a woman who had never, I worked for her in operations. She had never been a case officer. She was what was called a reports officer, meaning when the case officer collected the raw intelligence, she would make sure that the formatting was correct and the source descriptor was correct, and she would send it into headquarters for release. Well, in the 1980s, a large group of female CIA operations employees filed a class action suit saying that they had been discriminated against because they were women. They had been discriminated against. And so in the Eastern District of Virginia, a judge found that they had indeed been discriminated against. He said in his decision that he had never seen a defendant in a case so deeply document its own crime as the CIA did by, they turned over in discovery memos saying oh, don't promote her, she's a woman. Promote the guy instead. Like they actually wrote this down and kept it.
And they're supposed to be intelligence, man.
Yeah. So every woman in operations got a 2-grade promotion. So you go from a 12 to a 14. That's a significant promotion. A 13 to a 15. These are very significant promotions. Well, she was one of those people that got the 2-grade promotion. She had never been on a covert meeting in her life. She had never recruited a spy in her life. But all of a sudden, she became the chief of the biggest station in the world. And then on the strength of that, became the deputy director of national intelligence. That kind of thing happens a lot, where this woman, excuse the pun, she was a boob. I mean, I never worked for anybody who was so cut off from the day-to-day life of an operations officer, and frankly, had no idea what the analyst did all day long. She had no idea, nor did she care. Who made it literally to the very top of the intelligence community.
Jesus Christ. Well, what about our current director of CIA?
Burns? Oh, yeah. I mean, Burns is, he's sort of the worst from the standpoint with his heritage as a foreign service officer. You know, he understands the business of intelligence, but he's a political animal. And that's the problem with this. You've got to try to divorce the politics. If you're going to get a real intelligence done, the politics have got to be divorced from it. I am suggesting that I'm incredibly naive, but it is really, you need somebody that's going to tell you the truth. You know, hey, honey, do I look fat in this dress? Well, you know,
you do.
You know, if you're married, you know that the correct answer to that is no. So, or if you want to stay married,
you look lovely. Yeah,
that's an example where politics comes in, interferes with doing real intelligence analysis, as opposed to saying, yeah, you know, you could drop a few pounds and you'd look better. You know, that would be the truth, but you get in trouble. Unfortunately, I think what has allowed this political corruption to take place has been because we've not faced an existential threat in the United States since the Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, World War I, World War II, Korea, none of those posed existential threats to us. So as a result, you could always get away with hiring Fredo to do the bookkeeping. Okay. And
that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's the kind of thing that where it's not life and death, because when it gets down to life and death, if you look back at the founding of the Republic here in the United States, that those men who gathered in Philadelphia and put this documents together, they had flaws, and they were far from perfect, and they allowed, you know, slavery, but there was a level of competence among them that was extraordinary. That when you compare that with the current group of folks that inhabit Congress and the halls of the Senate or the House of Representatives, it was appalling. I was just reading the other day as an example, the Republicans elected a guy up in New York who lied. I mean,
George Santos.
Santos, unbelievable. He lied about everything. That he
even lied about being gay. He said that he's been openly gay for 10 years and he was married to a woman until a year and a half ago.
Okay, that's a first. You know,
so
lying about being in the closet, that's a first.
Yeah.
So
they get away with this because there's no price.
I wonder if YouTube would bump me in the algorithm if I claimed I was gay, or maybe said I identify as a woman. Would that help? I don't know, man. Apparently, you know, that's the way to go nowadays in this current culture.
L'intérêt majeur de ces analyses et témoignages, vécus, sarcastiques et convergents, est d'être fondés sur une connaissance empirique des faits, et leur analyse rationnelle. Des analyses spontanément matérialistes et dialectiques, en ceci qu'elles partent du principe marxiste fondamental que Le mode de production de la vie matérielle conditionne le processus de vie sociale, politique et intellectuelle en général, et que par conséquent, ce n'est pas la conscience des hommes qui détermine leur être, c'est inversement leur être social qui détermine leur conscience. Y compris celle des agents de la communauté du renseignement. Une communauté qui, comme toutes les autres, est faite de gens qui doivent bien gagner leur vie, et auxquels on ne peut reprocher à ce titre, d'essayer de le faire au mieux de leurs intérêts, fussent-ils de classe. La leçon de cette histoire est que l'ensemble de notre appareil idéologique, multimédiatique, est bel et bien intégré à une vaste classe, du renseignement. Cette dernière rassemble dans un même pot commun de banalités médiocres, nos élus et cadres dirigeants, nos actionnaires petits et grands, aussi bien que nos intellectuels, spécifiques comme organiques, et de droite et de gauche, selon l'arc-en-ciel bariolé des nouveaux progressismes. Qu'ils soient premiers de cordée, ou rebelles de comptoir, écolo-opportunistes, écommunistes, souverainistes, identitaires, gilets bruns ou écoféministes voire plus si affinités, ils sont à la carte du menu libéral. En plat du jour, le soufflé Zelensky aux petits légumes nazis, avec fromage narco-trotskiste, dessert gramsciste et café intersectionnel compris. On comprend alors pourquoi, pour nos très positivistes cousins anglo-saxons, renseignement se dit intelligence. Produisant cette communauté des anneaux olympiques, sur fond d'irréalité augmentée, bienveillante, soutenable et éco-résiliente. C'est la source du soft power, une énergie renouvelable, mobilisée pour le sauvetage de la planète. C'est la base d'une idéologie qui se présente comme non conformiste à l'instar de ses précurseurs personnalistes depuis l'entre-deux-guerres. Elle alimente un vaste intelligence-service, coopté et déjà pléthorique au sein de la classe moyenne occidentale la plus parasitaire. Une couche sociale encore étendue depuis la guerre froide, et finalement promue à l'hégémonie consensuelle. Cette souche idéologique, bien stratifiée, assume depuis lors la production collective de ce qui est censé nous informer, et par là donner une forme à cette réalité virtualisée, d'un monde qu'elle est en charge non pas de produire, mais de nous vendre. Qu'importe que tout ça soit vrai, du moment que ça fait sens, et que ce sens aille dans celui de nos nouvelles valeurs d'anticonformistes stéréotypés.